In 2011, despite the growth of women's football in Spain becoming more and more evident, players of the women's team started accusing the federation of basically not giving a damn. Head coach Ignacio Quereda had been in charge for over 24 years despite the fact he had only qualified for one tournament throughout his entire tenure. Keep in mind, his tenure is the longest in international football ever. To this day. However, World Cup 2015 was the final straw. Spain qualified for the tournament but embarrassed themselves, finishing bottom of their group. This was despite having a really solid core of players, including the likes of Jennifer Hermoso, Veronica Boquet, and a young Alexia Putellas. This prompted protests and a statement from the entire World Cup squad calling for the resignation of Quereda, better tournament preparation, and an improved culture. The culture, in particular, was pretty vague at the time, but then in October 2021, a documentary called Romper el Silencio, or Breaking the Silence in English, featured interviews from former players detailing Quereda's culture of rampant fear, bigotry, and sexism. Quereda, to many, was a tyrant. For example, he didn't permit players to close their hotel doors until he had checked on everyone and then shut the doors himself. The former coach was also very homophobic, while an openly gay player was on the team. It was said that on numerous occasions, players expressed concerns, but the president at the time continued to enable Quereda. The RFEF, which is the Spanish Federation, would eventually force Quereda to resign in 2015, but only due to public pressure. In his place came Jorge Vilda. Jorge was a Nepo baby. He's the son of Angel Vilda, one of the most renowned physical trainers of the 80s and 90s. Angel, after his time with some legendary teams, including Johan Cruyff's Barcelona, decided to join the federation. He quickly learned the ins and outs of the federation's system and noticed the nepotism running throughout. So once he gained a higher position of power, he joined into that nepotism and brought his son Jorge into the system. Jorge, who was originally a player before a career-ending injury, took advantage of this opportunity from his father and quickly got his coaching licenses. He was then entrusted with the women's youth teams after his father retired and found great success. But when he was appointed the head coach of the senior team in 2015, there were a lot of questions. No doubt he was great at youth level, but the guy had never coached a professional team in his life. And sure enough, his limited knowledge and experience in the professional game was exposed for the whole nation to see. Spain's squad was in the process of becoming a golden generation. However, under Jorge, the team failed to win a single knockout stage match in his first 4 tournaments. At that point, most federations would have replaced their coach, but the RFEF decided to extend his contract to 2024 after the failures in Euro 2022. It was pretty clear at this point Jorge wasn't actually hired for his tactics. He was hired to be a puppet for the federation to carry on its nepotism. To back up that claim, let's go to 2015 again. Quereda was replaced, but remember, the federation only did that because of public pressure. In the past, they had enabled Quereda's behavior, and so when they were forced to let him go, the RFEF wanted to make sure that everyone knew who was in charge. Captain Veronica Boquet was one of the most vocal figures against Quereda. So following the hiring of Jorge Vilda, Boquet was slowly phased out of the team and eventually omitted entirely in 2017. The same happened with multiple other players. Another thing to mention is that Jorge Vilda has significant influence in the Spanish FA. He isn't just the coach, he's also a technical director for the women's side of the game. Throughout Vilda's tenure, key players had pointed out the lack of tactical knowledge and analysis from backroom staff. Players also pointed out the lack of physical preparation and overall quality of training sessions. In fact, there were reports about players coming back to their club teams from national duty in worse shape than before they left. Not to mention, the presence of authoritarianism was still very much visible. As similar to Quereda, Vilda had a rule that players couldn't lock their hotel rooms until he came over and checked if everything was fine. However, it is said that this rule was banished after the election of new Federation President Luis Rubiales. And just like in 2015, it was another poor performance in a major tournament that broke the camel's back. A huge core of the team decided to set up a private meeting with Federation President Luis Rubiales to express their dissatisfaction with their coach. However, Rubiales rejected the idea of sacking Vilda. News then leaked out to the press about the interaction, and soon it left the players no choice but to explain to the public their side of the story to simmer the situation. Vilda then responded to the press conference saying, quote, "I was hurt by the way players behaved. They went beyond any dressing room code in football. What happens in the dressing room and stays in the dressing room gets resolved there." It should be pointed out that one of the biggest criticisms about the coach was his childish treatment of multiple senior players in the past. Besides, it wasn't like his first or second year at the job, this was his 7th. So judging from the info we have, the players definitely tried to reach out to him. And even then, they have absolutely every right to privately complain to the federation. Either way though, again, Rubiales denied the idea of sacking Vilda, and Vilde refused to resign. So then in response, ahead of the first international window after the Euros, an email sent to the federation signed by 15 players said that due to the current landscape, players' emotional and physical states had been significantly affected, and until any changes to the staff were made, the players listed on the email would refuse any call-up to the national team. Players that didn't sign but showed public support included Alexia Putellas, Jennifer Hermoso, and captain Irene Paredes. Paredes would have signed the email, but her prominence in the first revolt led to public pressure and her being mentally fatigued. So, what did the federation do? Well, they took that private email to public local media. The RFEF then released their own statement saying that they would not accept being pressured by any player to make sporting decisions, adding that they would not call up any of the 15 players until they admitted their quote-unquote error. And of course, this reeked of classic PR. Like the statement, the national team needs players who are committed to the project and the defense of our colors, and who are proud to wear Spain's shirts. Not ironic at all. Since most of the players who signed the email were from Barcelona, the national team would call up a majority of its players from Real Madrid. Not to say they weren't supporting the rebellion, it was just because both Real Madrid and Atletico Madrid advised their players not to get involved. However, seeing that the national team had to oftentimes call up inexperienced or even injured players, the federation started realizing they didn't have as much power in this dispute as they thought. Slowly, talks started, and players like Hermoso, Putellas, and Paredes returned to the national team. Then, with the World Cup approaching, the federation made compromises with some of the original 15 players who signed the email. Some of the so-called Las Quince returned having seen progress, while others continued to refuse call-ups, citing they hadn't seen enough. Reports said that during the whole dispute, players felt betrayed by others who didn't sign the email nor show support. However, by the time the World Cup had arrived, everyone in the squad realized there was a far bigger concern: winning the tournament. That didn't stop them from hilariously ignoring Jorge Vilde though, but the Golden Generation achieved their goal in the end after defeating England 1-0. The women celebrated into the night and would live on the high of conquering the world for the weeks to come. Unfortunately, that has not been the case at all. As the Spanish team celebrated their World Cup victory, so did Federation President Luis Rubiales. He carried a player on his shoulder for the whole world to see, grabbed his crotch next to the Queen of Spain and her underage daughter. Then during the medal ceremony, without consent, he kissed Jennifer Hermoso on the lips. He went one step further during celebrations in the dressing room and joked about marrying Hermoso. This guy's a f***ing creep. Going back to the kiss though, Jenny on a livestream said, quote, "Yeah, I did not enjoy that." Hours later though, on behalf of Hermoso, the Spanish Federation released a statement saying, quote, "This was a totally spontaneous and mutual gesture due to the immense joy that winning the World Cup gave us. The president and I have a great relationship, his behavior with everyone has been excellent, and it was a natural gesture of affection and gratitude. We have won a World Cup and we are not going to lose sight of what is important." The statement, to the shock of absolutely no one, was not actually from Hermoso. The Federation was simply trying to just downplay the situation and defend a weirdo, using her name, without consent. Again, the reaction amongst most was of disgust. However, Rubiales' initial response basically disregarded the outrage by calling them losers. However, that practically bit him right back in the ass hours later when outrage became widespread in Spain to the point that the Minister of Culture and Sport called for an explanation. What followed was a YouTuber apology from Luis Rubiales. And I don't mean that as just a joke, because in the video he said, quote, "We saw the kiss as natural, but it has caused a commotion and people are offended, so I must apologize." You can't tell me that is your typical YouTuber apology. Just slap in the ukulele and that's perfect. Also, it should be mentioned that Rubiales was begging Hermoso's family to tell her to join him in his apology video to downplay the kiss. Jesus Christ, what a piece of shit. Then came a day later when the Spanish Women's Players Union, FootPro, called for Rubiales to be sanctioned. Quickly in response, the Spanish Federation scheduled an emergency meeting before the weekend. In this meeting, it was expected for Rubiales to step down as president.
¿Ustedes creen que tengo que dimitir? Pues les voy a decir algo. No voy a dimitir. No voy a dimitir. No voy a dimitir. No voy a dimitir.
Does this dude think he's the Wolf of fucking Wall Street? So after he showed himself to be the clown he is, Rubiales decided to triple down? Quadruple down? I don't even know at this point, man. But he starts to generate this Wattpad-ass fanfic of how the kiss actually happened. Like, dog, we saw you in 4K. you didn't say any of this shit. But it doesn't stop there, no, because he starts claiming that social assassination is being carried out on him by fake feminism. And then he has this moment with Jorge Vilda in attendance saying shit like, you and I, we've been through it all, but we don't let the wokies win. Okay, he didn't actually say that, but it's pretty close. However, after that tangent, it just gets worse, because then Rubiales told Vilda he was more than happy to offer the coach a 4-year extension worth $500,000. Someone please get this man off the stage. Shortly after that, a letter signed by 81 Spanish players, including the whole World Cup winning squad, stated they would reject call-ups to the national team until change in leadership. They also described the actions of Rubiales as violating the dignity of women. Then Hermoso released her own statement saying she did not consent to the kiss. In fact, she felt vulnerable and a victim of an impulse-driven, sexist, out-of-place act, and that Rubiales' story was categorically false. Hermoso also confirmed that the reports of the Federation begging her to downplay the incidents in a joint statement were indeed true. She then reiterated her initial answer all the way back in the dressing room and said she did not like the kiss. At this point, the press conference was done and over. But the clown show? Oh, no. It was just beginning. Because then the fucking Federation itself triples down and threatens legal action against Hermoso. They released a statement of their quote-unquote investigation where 4 photos are displayed to prove that Rubiales did not lie. Jesus fucking Christ. Again, hate to repeat myself, but we saw the same footage, you know? I've also seen a couple claims where people are saying, well, if she didn't want the kiss, why didn't she just move her head? Well, her fucking head was being held like she was Fredo in Godfather 2. There was no way she was escaping that. The next day was a big surprise for many, because FIFA actually did something good. Rubiales was provisionally suspended from all football-related activities for 90 days. Both he and the Federation were also ordered to refrain from contacting Hermoso, and it didn't take long for the clown show to respond to this suspension. They first acknowledged the suspension through their website and social media and said Rubiales would defend himself. Then in a second statement, the Federation accused Hermoso of lying again and said she had been making serious allegations since she was, quote, abducted by the Foot Pro Union, which really just says a lot about the Federation if it's against unions. Now, this particular statement wasn't posted on social media, which is pretty telling, honestly. Then following this statement, 11 members of the coaching staff announced their resignations. However, Jorge Vilda remained despite criticizing Rubiales. But that's pretty much where we end off for now. So a couple things have come out since the recording, like the fact that Rubiales' mother has locked herself inside a church and is going on a hunger strike. Her son's trying to be Jordan Belfort, while she's trying to be f***ing Gandhi. The Spanish government has also been involved in sanctioning Rubiales. I kind of forgot to mention that in the main recording. But the clown show continues to not bow down and has asked UEFA just today to remove them for quote-unquote government intervention to save Rubiales. If this went through, it would mean all Spanish clubs would be kicked out of any European competition. And you might be asking, why the hell is the RFEF doing all this for one man? It's simple. Nepotism runs so deeply in this federation that any conceding threatens that very system. Now, thankfully, UEFA rejected that request. Finally, the most recent news from about an hour ago, Spanish prosecutors have now opened a preliminary sex abuse investigation into the president. Outside of Rubiales and the women's team, we've seen a lot of people show solidarity with Hermoso. Legends like Iker Casillas and Andres Iniesta have shown their supports. Current players like Hector Bellerin, Borja Iglesias, and David De Gea have also, and of course the entirety of the women's football world has joined together with the message, Contigo Jenny, or with you, Jenny. To conclude though, this whole situation is just sad. The recent Women's World Cup was already showing the world just how much the women's game had grown. We saw great games, great stories, and parity never seen before. This was also the first Women's World Cup to break even, which just goes to show just how much the interest as well has skyrocketed. In 1971, the Spanish Federation president of the time was quoted saying he wasn't against women's football, but didn't like it either, adding that he didn't see it as feminine. To go through that and the national team neglected for nearly 30 years and the ongoing issues that the Federation never listening to its players, to winning the World Cup despite it all, was just the cherry on top of this incredible tournament. Spanish women of the last few generations had dreamed of this moment, and now it was finally reality. What you see here is a group of women who worked so hard to make this triumph possible. This is what we should be talking about. Olga Carmona scored the only goal in the final and after celebrations was notified of her father's passing. And the speech she gave during another celebration was inspirational poetism. Again, this is what we should be talking about. But unfortunately, a selfish, sexist creep has taken all the headlines, stolen the spotlight, and soiled any and all celebrations. This bald little who once tried to sue Wikipedia because of information that he saw as damaging to his reputation has poisoned this entire tournament. All this progress in women's football has once again been overshadowed by a system that allows those in power to feel immortal. So that was the Clown Show, that's the Spanish Federation. A massive shout out to all our patrons, of course, including Janos Barash, Stin, Milioway009, Adnazir Makalankom, Aldipu, Alex Rod, Ulta, Aresan, Carlos Anaya, Daniel Ortiz, Francisco Hernandez, Ilea, Joel Carvalho, Josh Budd, Marco Fujimoto, Miguel Munoz, Return Fire, Rory Burns, Slider Kits, Snifferx, Taco Okafan, Tana Permelia, Celine Khan, Tomakis, Victor, Chris Damasceno, Chris Visconti, Q90 Champs 2022, Dominic Griffin, Emmett Shea, Lewis, Joe Aparicio, Lucian Von Croix, Michael Nista, Nish, Patrick Barley, Rowan Cookie, Sylvia Citrus, subscribe to Tendetem, Unbroken Persona, and Valencia 14. If you'd like to join the Patreon, there'll be a link down below and up in the annotations. You can follow my Twitter if you want, follow my Instagram if you like, follow my TikTok, trying to get to 20,000 there, and of course you can follow my semi-active Twitch. But until then, I'll see you guys.